Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. What do you do when the government of a country in the middle of a violent conflict hands you $100 million to build your dream car? That car turns out to be slow, unreliable, and way too expensive, and your entire company is collapsing in real time. If you're John DeLorean, apparently you meet an undercover FBI agent in a hotel room, open a suitcase full of cocaine, and get caught on camera saying it's better than gold. This is the story of the DeLorean DMC-12. The car that outlived the company, the conflict, and the criminal trial that should have ended its creator's career entirely. John DeLorean was, by any measure, one of the most talented people ever to walk through General Motors' front door. Detroit-born, the son of an auto worker, he trained as an engineer, worked his way up through Packard and then GM, and by most accounts was the design mind behind two of the most iconic American muscle cars ever built, the Pontiac GTO and the Firebird. He became a GM vice president in 1972. A year later, at the peak of a genuinely enviable corporate career, he walked away from it entirely. DeLorean wanted to build his own car under his own name, and in 1975, he founded the DeLorean Motor Company in Detroit, the first entirely new American car company to be founded since 1925. His vision was a sleek, futuristic sports car with a body made of unpainted brushed stainless steel and doors that opened upward instead of outward, gull wing style, unlike almost anything else on the road. Building that vision took real money, and DeLorean found an unlikely source for it. The British government, desperate to bring jobs and investment into Northern Ireland during a period of intense political violence and staggeringly high unemployment, agreed to fund the bulk of DeLorean's factory, eventually pouring roughly £100 million of public money into a new manufacturing plant in Dunmurry, just outside Belfast. Private investors added to the pot too, including television host Johnny Carson and entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. For a region caught in the middle of what's remembered as the Troubles, the DeLorean factory represented something genuinely significant, real jobs, and a rare vote of international confidence. The finished car, the DMC-12, finally reached production in 1981. It looked like nothing else on the market, and thanks to a rear-mounted V6 engine developed jointly by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, it could get to 60 miles an hour in around 8 seconds. Respectable, but not exceptional. And it was expensive, roughly $25,000, at a time when an average American car cost about $10,000, and even a well-equipped Corvette ran closer to 18. Manufacturing delays and persistent quality problems compounded the issue further. Sales simply never came close to the numbers DeLorean needed to keep the operation afloat. By 1982, the company was in genuine financial freefall. DeLorean, according to his own later legal defense, became increasingly desperate to find funding from anywhere he could get it, to save both the company and the thousands of Northern Irish jobs riding on it. That desperation is what federal investigators were reportedly counting on. On October 19, 1982, the very same day the British government formally announced it was shutting down DeLorean's Northern Ireland factory, John DeLorean was arrested by the FBI in a Los Angeles hotel room. Federal agents had spent months building a sting operation, and that day they presented him with a suitcase containing over 50 pounds of cocaine, tied to an alleged $24 million drug deal. Hidden cameras recorded DeLorean examining the drugs and reportedly remarking that it was, quote, better than gold. He was arrested on the spot, charged with conspiracy to distribute narcotics, facing decades in prison if convicted. DeLorean's legal team built their entire defense around a single argument: entrapment. They argued that federal agents, fully aware of DeLorean's crumbling finances and mounting desperation, had specifically engineered a scheme calculated to draw him in, using a paid informant who allegedly pressured DeLorean by threatening his family. After a lengthy, closely watched trial and nearly 30 hours of jury deliberation, DeLorean was acquitted of all charges in August of 1984, but by then, the company itself was already gone. Just a week after his arrest, DeLorean Motor Company filed for bankruptcy. The Northern Ireland factory closed for good by the end of that same year. In total, across its brief production run, only around 9,000 DMC-12s were ever built. DeLorean himself wasn't finished with the courts either, facing separate fraud allegations over the years that followed and paying out millions of dollars to creditors and lawyers well into the 1990s. Asked afterward how he thought people might view him, DeLorean reportedly quipped, quote, "Would you buy a used car from me?" And then, in 1985, something happened that neither the bankruptcy nor the drug trial could have predicted. The DMC-12 became the time machine in the film Back to the Future, instantly transforming a commercially failed, scandal-tainted sports car into one of the most recognizable vehicles in movie history. Decades later, the DeLorean's stainless steel silhouette is arguably more famous today than it ever was as an actual product for sale. So much so that it's since been formally added to the National Historic Vehicle Register, one of only a small number of cars ever recognized that way. John DeLorean died in 2005, having spent much of his later life working to rebuild both his reputation and his finances. The car that carried his name outlived the company, the scandal, and the man himself, ultimately becoming exactly the kind of cultural icon he'd originally set out to build, just not for any of the reasons he'd originally intended. Do you think the DMC-12 would still be remembered today if it hadn't ended up in Back to the Future? Or was the DeLorean always destined to become a legend, scandal and all? Let me know what you think in the comments.